Lindisfarne, England, 793 AD. Several hundred Viking raiders make landfall on this small tidal island off the coast of Northumbria to plunder a great monastery of its rumored treasures. An account of the attack on Lindisfarne says the assault coincided with extraordinary whirlwinds, lightning, and fiery dragons crisscrossing the skies. Could these strange events be coincidence? Or could it be evidence that otherworldly forces may have been allied with the Vikings? Ancient astronaut theorists believe the answer can be found by examining the divine beings that form the basis of Norse religion and mythology.
The Norse gods were worshipped over a very wide range of time and space throughout Northern Europe, from the continental German lands, through the British Islands, the far northern islands such as Iceland and Greenland, and all throughout Scandinavia.
Because little information has survived related to the origin of the Norse or Viking gods, modern scholars depend on a pair of Icelandic books written several hundred years after the Viking Age, called the Eddas.
And so we find that there's the god Odin, the god Frey, the god Thor. Those are probably the best known, but there are a bunch of other supporting gods who flesh out this mythology. The gods live in a world of their own, but it's closely connected to the world of men.
The Norse had some of the richest descriptions and references to the cosmos. In fact, they referred to the cosmos as Yggdrasil, meaning the tree of life. That was the symbol of their idea of the cosmos. And they were very specific in stating that their cosmos contained 9 different worlds, one of which is ours, the Earth.
We often hear about the 9 worlds of the Nordic mythological realm. There's Asgard, and that's the home of the gods Thor and Odin. There's the world of humans. We call this Middle Earth or Midgard. If we go step a little bit further outside of Asgard and Midgard, we confront Jotunheim, or the land of the giants. We'll encounter Muspel, which is an area of fire. We'll encounter Niflheim, which is another world where the frost ogres live. We'll encounter Alfheim, which is where the elves live.
According to the Eddas, Asgard was home to the most powerful of the gods. It is described as a beautiful and peaceful realm, full of glimmering halls and fertile fields cut by shimmering rivers.
Odin is the chief of the gods. He lives in the highest of the heavens, Asgard. He had one eye. He had given up an eye to drink of the water of truth. And so he has this depth of wisdom. So he's a warrior god, able to bring fury and danger to the enemies.
Odin was the god that gave people written language in the runes. He was the god that gave them the poetic mead. He was the god that gave them many aspects of what would be considered a sort of noble way of life.
But was Odin perhaps something other than a mythical deity? Could he have actually existed? And if so, how? Ancient astronaut theorists believe clues to Odin's true identity may lie in the myths describing his 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin.
Odin's ravens were his scouts. They were his research team. Hugin and Munin represent thought and memory. So Odin had these scouts, these spy satellites that would go out and see what he needed to learn for today's activities.
According to Norse legends, every morning Odin sent out his 2 magical ravens, Hugin and Munin. And at night, those ravens would return and he would listen to them and they would tell him everything that they observed throughout the entire day.
Scholars believe Odin's 2 ravens, translated as thought and memory, were simply mythological creations. But is it possible that Hugin and Munin were actually something else? Something perhaps more technological?
Whenever he wanted to observe other worlds, find out what they were doing, he would send these two ravens out, and they would be like spy drones or something, and they would go to these other countries and then come back to Odin and report to him what was going on. And it would seem like what Odin had was some kind of spy planes or spy drones that he was sending out, much as we do today.
And the question is whether the Norse really stated that these were ravens, or whether they were instead something else, that they were somehow flying objects. So we have details here of something mythical, of ravens being able to speak to the gods, or the ravens as some kind of spy drone or some other kind of spy satellite technology by which Odin is able to get information.
Gamla Uppsala, Sweden. This small town, 40 miles north of Stockholm, is one of the oldest continuously inhabited sites in Scandinavia. Beneath this church, archaeologists have found what they believe are the remains of a famous temple called Uppsala. According to a 14th century text called the Deeds of Bishops of the Hamburg Church, this ornate temple was built to honor the most powerful Viking gods: Odin, Thor, and Freyr.
Frey is the main fertility god of Norse mythology. The rituals that we do have evidence of connected to Frey seem always to be connected to peace and prosperity. So all of these characteristics show him in a relationship with humans that's centered around prosperity and fertility of various types.
Freyr was believed to control the weather and was renowned for his diplomatic skills, quieting the feuds among the numerous Viking gods and giants. And in the Viking pantheon, it was a deity named Loki who provoked the most conflict among these gods.
Loki is actually not a god. He's a giant who is counted amongst the gods. And at the end of time, he actually leads the dead and the giants against the gods.
He's that transgressive character who makes possible all of these conflicts that the gods then have to solve. Without Loki, a lot of the conflicts disappear and you don't have a mythology at all.
According to the stories compiled within the books of the Eddas, Loki tries to atone for one of his many acts of mischief by giving Freyr a ship called Skidbladnir.
Freyr's ship, Skidbladnir, was the most fine craft that ever was in the water. It could go anywhere at great speed, and then, if he needed it to be small, he could put it in a small pouch to carry it around.
Skidbladnir is remarkable because you can fold it up and stick it in your pocket. But when you unfold it, it's one of the greatest Viking ships ever. It always has a wind. It always has a fair wind, so you don't have to tack. It always gets you where you're going in a hurry. And then once you get it to shore, you don't have to worry about where you're going to stow it. To be able to fold up your boat and put it in your pocket really has to be about the greatest thing that you can imagine if you're a Viking shipbuilder.
But could it be that Skidbladnir was not the product of mythic imagination, but was, in fact, an actual spacecraft, one that was witnessed by early Scandinavians? Ancient astronaut theorists say yes, and believe the proof lies in the legends of a race of beings who are believed to have built the magical tools used by the gods.
In Norse mythology, the sons of Ivaldi were these dwarves who made these special weapons for Thor and Odin and the other Norse gods. And so here were these dwarves, these gnomes, these small people. They're making these special, very high-tech weapons. The Norse gods are using them. So you have to wonder just who these mini people are.
The sons of Ivaldi were the master craftsmen of the gods in the Norse system, and they made each of these special things that are going to be needed by these heroic gods to do their deeds.
Might the sons of Ivaldi actually be the engineers behind the building of Skidbladnir, the magical ship used by the Norse god Freyr? If so, who or what were they?
Now the question is whether the sons of Vivaldi are real dwarfs, the way we know dwarfs today, or whether they are somehow more mythical, or whether the label dwarf actually stuck to them because they were somehow smaller. And of course today we quite often describe the grey alien archetype as dwarfish as well, simply because they are smaller.
Is it possible that these little people who are making these high-tech weapons were really gray aliens? And because they didn't know how to describe them, they will call them dwarves or little people? And these little people are the ones who are making these high-tech weapons for these Norse gods. And it would seem that these weapons are extraterrestrial in nature.
Over 1,000 miles north of Karnak lies Scandinavia, home to an ancient people called the Norse. The Norse were tribal Germanic people who lived in what is now known as Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, and Norway. Norse legends record the triumphs of great warriors with advanced weaponry, sophisticated combat techniques, and navigational prowess. Like the Greeks, Norse mythology includes supernatural beings, other worlds, and powerful gods. But like the Romans, could the Norse myths refer not to different gods, but the same gods as those depicted by the ancient Greeks?
There are a number of similarities between Greek mythology and Norse mythology, and many of the gods are almost identical, and they do much the same thing.
Descriptions of the Viking god Odin, the god of war, death, and knowledge, and the Greek god Zeus bear striking similarities.
Zeus and Odin are both sky father gods. They travel through the skies in chariots because they are akin to the solar divinities. The precursor to many religious beliefs is sun worship. The ancients knew that life came from the sun. So that is a great mystery and a source of great awe.
What you're getting there is not just some minor deity, but you really are nailing it down to one of the chief deities. This is a very important character. And so whoever is behind Odin or Zeus is obviously a person or a divine entity which is shared by these cultures. And it's clear that whoever inspired the myth of Zeus or Odin is somehow somebody who had an extremely important contribution to make to both civilizations. So this entity was definitely known throughout Europe.
Ancient alien theorists also point to similarities between the sophisticated weapons possessed by both the Norse and the Greek gods. Among Odin's weapons was a spear that never missed its target. The Norse god Thor, god of storms, strength, and fertility, wielded a powerful hammer.
Right there we have a correlation, a connection, because not only does Zeus have the thunderbolt, but what does Odin have and Thor? They have a hammer. Thor has a hammer with which he can smash things, destroy things, and, you know, the hammer idea is pretty close with the description to the lightning rod that Zeus has.
So you have to wonder if these tales of Zeus's thunderbolts, Thor's hammer, if these weren't real weapons, Just like we have today, where we have directed energy beam weapons or are developing some kind of literal thunderbolt coming out of a spacecraft.
Trelleborg, Denmark. Here, along the northern reaches of the European continent, lie the archaeological ruins of a Viking fortress dating to 900 AD. For decades, mainstream historians have been baffled by the precise nature of Trelleborg's perfectly circular design, with a courtyard divided into 4 zones, each with 4 long houses, and gateways open precisely to the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. Some believe such a strict geometric design would have required extensive knowledge of advanced engineering. The mystery deepened in 1982, when pilot Preben Hansen discovered a direct line of flight from Trelleborg to 3 other Viking fortresses, all constructed with a similar design.
Trelleborg was the starting point. 40 miles farther, another fort appeared. Then he found others, so that there was a line of 4 forts in Denmark.
Given that the Vikings were basically seafaring people, and these sites are spread out so far over land and great distances, it implies that maybe they had some other way of getting to these places. Perhaps they even were able to fly. Now, how they would fly, what the technology was, it's a good question, but it seems unlikely that they would be able to find all these spots, survey them, and place monuments and structures there if they were simply a seafaring race.
These Viking fortresses are all on one straight line. You continue the one line straight ahead over the Alps for thousands and thousands of kilometers, and under the line always holy places from antiquity, from Stone Age. And the line points directly to Delphi, Delphi in Greece. Delphi was the place of the god Apollo, and the mythology about Apollo says every year, 2 times, Apollo took his heavenly chariot, disappeared in a faraway land in the north. Apollo flies on one straight line. At several points he makes a stop. Wherever he makes a stop, the Stone Age people start to create a holy place of it, because here was a god.
Is it possible that the ley lines that connected early civilizations were actually flight paths, as ancient astronaut theorists believe? And might such flight paths have been used by extraterrestrial spacecraft?
The extraterrestrials in the past knew exactly that the future generations would develop technology, they would fly, they would measure, they would photograph their own land. So by photographing their land, they would realize something is strange here in the ground.
How could a straight line link ancient Egypt, the pyramids, the Oracle of Delphi in Greece, and Viking fortresses that would have been established thousands of years later? It made no sense. But it does make sense if these installations are along straight lines across the Earth's grid, and if somehow those straight lines marked navigation routes for ancient extraterrestrials that use them as markers to navigate the globe from society to society.
Is it possible that these ancient sites along ley lines were nothing else but refueling stations for ancient astronaut craft? And the answer is yes, because just like today, a plane goes in straight lines. And if a plane needs to refuel, it lands at an airport that's on its course and not, 1,000 miles to the east or 1,000 miles to the west. A plane flies straight.
It was suggested that UFOs may be connected in some way, because it could well be that they are following the paths of geomagnetic fields, the different variations, the different strengths that exist. It was often seen that UFOs seemed to either appear or descend or rise in connection with where the ley lines seem to intersect. And this has been seen time and time again around the world at different UFO hotspots.